Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Acumen's Webinar Wednesday. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Stephen Phelps, and I am the Marketing Director here at Acumen. And today we brought in Isabel to go over Sage Intacct 2024 Release 4. This release comes with updates in accounts receivable and accounts payable, along with future enhancements. In addition, we'll also show you how to prepare for the 1099 season. Before I pass it over to Isabel, please note that today's webinar is in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, then please use the chat option and we'll answer near the end of the presentation. With that, we have a lot to cover in 30 minutes, so I will now pass it on to Isabel.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Let me go ahead and get started. Start our slideshow. So as Stephen mentioned, we are going to be covering some of the features in the latest Intacct release from November 8th. And again, we're going to talk a little bit about accounts receivable, accounts payable, 1099s, and a little preview of what Intacct is working on for one of the AP bills screen. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so accounts receivable. The very first enhancement that I wanted to highlight was related to, or is related to, the AR statement. Intacct now has added a running balance field to the table that can then be added to a custom AR statement template. Previously, we had some clients that if one of their customers requested a statement with a running balance, users would have to rely on exporting the AR ledger report to Excel, reformatting, and then sending that over to the customer. So if this is something that you would like to have added to your custom AR statements, please open up a case with our CSP support team at csp@acumenfl.com. Right? The next item or feature release for 2024 release 4, it's the AR automated reconciliation tool. With this feature, when you enable it, Intacct will assign a sequence identifier to all transactions related to an invoice. So users can then run the reconciliation report to view how a payment was applied, if an adjustment was applied, and then see that relationship between those transactions and the original invoice. Now, let's review the configuration changes needed to have this feature available on the next slide. So the very first thing that we would have to do is make sure that we enable the functionality under accounts receivable configuration. Along with that, we'll need to set up a new document sequence and make sure that that's our default. And this is the document sequence that Intacct will use in the background and assign to as transactions are processed. The last step on the configuration changes will be to update the user's permissions to run the customer reconciliation report so that they can review the auto matching and the reconciliation. Okay, now that we have those configuration changes covered at a high level, let's just jump over to Intacct and walk you through those changes. So let me find my Intacct screen here. So of course, my demo company, all configuration is done at the top level. So let's go ahead and jump right into accounts receivable, setup, and configuration. We're then going to scroll down to the section for document sequencing. And at the very bottom, you have the customer reconciliation. So you can see I've checked my box agreeing to having this turned on. And then right below it, I have a AR matching sequence, AR reconciliation. Now there's a few requirements related to that document sequencing. And so of course, we want to make sure that we have a unique sequence ID. So I just assigned a very generic AR reconciliation. Under the sequence name, you can have that match your sequence ID, or you can add more details as to what the use of that uh, matching or document sequence is being used for. One thing to know is that Intacct requires for this sequence to be alpha, so you'll want to make sure that your sequence type is set up as such. And then of course, you're gonna have the option to either add a prefix, pick your separator, but your primary sequence, Intacct recommends that you go ahead and set it to A. And then as you can see, I have done a few testing samples, and so my next primary sequence when we post an invoice and receive payment will be assigned the letter F. So Intacct will keep track of that, and then it will keep adding characters to the sequence as you start using the functionality. Okay. So again, after I check my box and assign my AR matching sequence here, I'm going to save my changes. And the next step now will be to go over to the company section, and under admin, we're going to edit the roles where we want to allow the users to be able to run the customer reconciliation report. In my sample data, that is only the AR manager. So I'm going to click on subscription for that role, find my accounts receivable permissions. And if I scroll down to the reporting section, I'm going to make sure that I tick the box for customer reconciliation and save all my changes. Okay, so we have now gone through and enabled the functionality. Let's process an invoice and receive a couple of payments just to show you what that looks like once you have it enabled. So I'm now going to process a transaction from my entity 100. And we're going to jump over to accounts receivable, all, and invoices. So add, I'll leave my dates as of today. Select my customer. Let's do easy service. Leave my terms and currency as is. And now I'm just going to select a revenue account. Set this to, I don't know, $550. And we'll just enter the sales department there. Okay. So we'll post our invoice, and I'm going to run that customer reconciliation report to show you that even though we haven't applied any transactions to that invoice that we just issued, we can still see it available in our report. So I'm going to push the as of date to the end of the month. And I'm not going to filter for any specific customer for now. And one thing that I will do is make sure that I select the type of matching that I want. So Intacct's going to keep track of things that have been unmatched, partially matched, and fully matched. And so we're going to just click all in there, click on view. You will also have the option to run them individually. So you can see in here for easy match, I have my invoice. Okay, there's no matching sequence value there. But now let's say it's been a couple of weeks and we have received payment for that transaction, and we'll actually make it a partial payment. So the payment receipt process will remain the same. You'll select your bank account, enter a check number. Let's say we received, sure, let's just receive $500 against that. Because I only had one invoice in my system for that vendor, for that customer, I'm going to go ahead and apply that, and only $50 will remain. So now if I click on post to new, and again, return to my customer reconciliation report, I should now see, let's just click on fully matched and partially matched here. And yeah, I can now see that I have my invoice, I have my payment for $500, and notice the difference between the lowercase f and up above here, I have uppercase E and C's and D's. And the main difference is that anything that has been partially matched, okay, will have a lowercase letter. Once this transaction is fully paid, you're going to see that it has been fully matched and the letter casing changes. You can see in here, I did the same example with AB Square. I posted a $500 invoice, and then I have two payments that relate to that. And now, because this $500 invoice is fully paid, we could see that the matching sequence is a lower uppercase E. So back to our presentation. Now, with accounts payable. On the opposite side of the ledger, the first functionality we want to review is a new option that allows you to include a secondary email address on the vendor profile and have that be a contact when sending automatic payment notifications. So to have this option available, you will need to make some configuration changes under accounts payable configuration. Next, we'll need to make sure that the vendor has been set up to receive automatic payment notifications. And then we'll also need to check that the secondary email address field has information that will be used. Now, you do have the option for that secondary email field to hold more than one email address as long as it is separated by a comma or a semicolon. Okay, so if we now jump back to our Intacct instance, and this time I'm going to jump over to my top level. Again, I have all of my vendor records at the top level, and all of my configuration changes, we make them at the top level. So accounts payable configuration. And under the enable section, we're going to find the option to include secondary email contacts in automatic payment notifications. So we will check that box, click save. Now there will not be any user role updates that you'll need to do. You'll just check that box and the functionality will now be available. The one thing you will need to do is, again, make sure that the vendor has been configured for email notification. So I'll just pick this very top one. And under the payment information tab, you'll want to make sure that the bots for send automatic payment notifications is checked. And the secondary email fields that will be used with this new functionality, the first one will be the vendor. On the vendor tab, if you scroll down here towards the bottom under the primary contact, you can have two emails in here. You can see I have my email and our support inbox email separated by a semicolon. Okay. And if in your instance you have a vendor whose pay to or remit to address is different from the primary contact, you'll want to make sure that the vendor's contact profile under the additional information tab that you populate this secondary email address. Okay. So those are the two areas where you'll want to populate the extra emails to be used by the system. All right, now if we jump back to our presentation. So we just cover on the AR side, the automated subledger reconciliation tool. Intacct has also added it on the AP side. The configuration changes are going to be the same. You'll need to first enable the functionality, assign the matching sequence, and it does need to be different than the one used by the AR module. So you'll end up with two different sequences if you turn it on in both modules. And then, of course, update your user permissions to allow the AP team to run the reconciliation report. One item that I did forget to mention on the when we were going the functionality in AR is that the auto matching sequence reconciliation will only apply to transactions posted to Intacct after the functionality has been turned on. It does not apply retroactively. So keep that in mind, okay? All right. Now, Stephen mentioned this, and the next item to cover that the webinar is not new functionality, but we know we're getting close to 1099 season, and so we wanted to do a quick step-by-step walkthrough of that. Now, I'm first going to high level discuss the steps, and then we'll jump over to Intad and we'll walk through the actual screens. Okay, so step number one, of course, is to verify that your vendors and employees have been set up for 1099. Okay. Step two would be to enter opening balances. So for those of you that have converted to Intacct halfway through the year, you'll want to make sure that 1099 balances tracked in a previous system have been imported to Intacct. And for those of you that have been in using Intacct for the entire year, if for some reason you find that when you run your 1099 report, the balances don't match what you think that you have paid the vendor, there is an option to update those transactions. So we'll go over that in a few minutes. Okay. Step three, it's going to be for you to run the 1099 report. Again, this is a second opportunity for you to review all of the information that we have in Intacct related to those vendors, as well as the balances, before you actually go through the steps to file, which is step four, which is to file the forms. Now, we know that anyone filing 1099s for more than 10 vendors will have to do that electronically as required by the law. And so Intacct does have an integration with a third-party vendor called Tax Bandit. And this is something that you can actually enable yourselves in the AP configuration screen. And so I'll briefly walk you through that, okay? For those of you filing that less than 1099 records, you could still choose to do it yourselves, meaning print the form and mail it out. Now, we do encourage you to either purchase the forms from the web address on the screen or use the check and supply hyperlink at the bottom right corner of your Intacct home screen so that you purchase pre-approved forms within Intacct. In the case that there is any corrections in alignment, those are the only forms that Intacct support will actually work on. Okay. So with that said, let's go over these 4 steps in our environment. All right. So reviewing all of and verifying that your vendors have been set up correctly. Now, so you can see here, I'm still at the top level, and my view here, it's 1099 vendors, which means I created a custom view. So to walk you really quickly through creating a new view, under Manage Views, you're going to see the option to create a new view. And I'm only interested in the 1099 fields. So, and I'm really only interested to make sure that I have the right form type and the right form bots as well as the tax ID. So those are the only fields that I kept. So I have my vendor ID, my vendor name in case that's just a DBA name and it's different from the 1099 name, my tax ID, form type, and Intacct continues to add this in every time I edit my view. So I untick that. And I don't really need the total due either, so I can also remove that. Okay. Under this dropdown, you'll have the option to select the column sequence that you want. You can also pre-filter your list. So for example, let's say you wanted to view all of your 1099 vendors within a specific state and you want that view pre-filter, you can certainly do that at this point. And then you can sort your filters. So if you want to sort by, the vendor ID, that's numerical, you can have that as an option. Otherwise, you can skip over to save advanced options, where you'll be able to assign a name to the view. And last but not least, if you tick on this deploy option, that will make the view available to all users. So it'll be nice to have if you have other team members working on the same project as you. Okay. Once you hit on save, you'll be taken back to the vendor list and you'll be able to select your view from here. Okay. So you can see in here, I have my vendor, my top vendor I don't have a 1099 name, but I do see the task ID, form type, and form 1099 bots available and what I have assigned. Okay. Next would be for us to make sure, again, if we're doing a mid-year conversion, that we bring in those opening balances into the system. So to do that, we're actually going to be doing it through an import. There is an option to do it manually, but I'm going to go ahead and cover the import because most likely the very first time you're doing this, you're bringing in more than 5 records and it's just going, and the volume will make it easier to do through an import. So under company setup, we have the import data screen, where we can actually scroll down to the AP master list section and see in here that we have a vendor 1099 opening balance. So in here, we would then click on template. And what the template will tell us that, the 6 columns that we need to bring that information. And so we'll need a vendor ID, vendor name, of course. Then you'll want to make sure that you have the entity that that's going to be filing the 1099 for those vendors. And then, of course, the form type, form of the bot, and the amount. Once you're done, you want to make sure that you save your file as a .csv file, and then you can return over to our company setup checklist screen and click on the import button, select your file, and bring that over to Intacct. As I mentioned, for those of you that have been in the system for the full year, if you run your 1099 report and find that the balances don't match, you can use the 1099 transaction update template to make any updates to your vendor's balance. All right. Now, step 3 was to run the 1099 report. So if we now go back to accounts payable, all, under the reports section, I'm going to see that I have the 1099s option. And if I click on that arrow, I can run my 1099 report. You can run this report by entity if needed. I'm just going to choose to leave everything. Okay. By default, the start and end date is set to the calendar year. So that's already pre-populated for you. You can also choose to run it by vendors first or by employees first. It's up to you. I'll just leave it as is. And then you can, in here, if we click on add, you're going to see all of the available options for 1099 forms that Intacct is set up for. I'm only going to leave miscellaneous and non-employee compensation in there. That way I don't get too many extra lines. And so you could see I want one transaction information for only 1099s or non-1099s. So you can also view that there. And so now if I click on view, I can see that for my Massachusetts Department of Revenue, I have 2 invoices for Entity USA 1 totaling, excuse me, $1,100. And I could see the category that I have assigned those 2 transactions. Okay. Now, to file the form, so if everything looks good in this report, your next step will be to file the form. And so to do that, what you'll want to do is go over to, again, if you're going to be filing electronically, you can go over to accounts payable. And if you scroll down to the 1099 section, you can see in here there's a checkbox to enable e-filing by TAT's Bandits. And again, this is a third-party integration that's already working with Intat. If you want to see more information before you turn it on, sorry guys, I had to cough. You can click on that little question mark, and this hyperlink here will take you through a video steps from Intat Help walking you through what you'll need to configure that. And then you can also click on the pricing hyperlink to view their pricing. Now keep in mind that since it's an integration with Intat, there is a discount on there for the number, depending on the number of forms that you choose to file. For those of you filing yourselves, the hyperlink that I mentioned earlier will be on if you click on the home icon on the top left part of your screen, down towards the bottom right on the opposite end, you can click on checks and supplies, shop US, and then in here, you'll be able to shop any tax forms. Okay, again, these forms have been pre-approved by Intat, and if there's any changes that are required to the alignment, Intat will only support these forms. Okay, so you want to make sure that you buy them from their pre-approved vendors. Okay, back to the presentation. So, the last items that I wanted to cover, it's kind of like a little preview to something that Inta's working on. So on the pay bill screen, we do have many clients that ask, why can't I sort by the bill or by the number? That's actually something that Inta's working on, and it's currently with their early adopters testers. Okay, a couple of enhancements that you'll see once this gets released. There's still not an exact date of to when we'll see it, but it's getting worked on. So you'll be able to load up to 5,000 bills at a time. Right now the limit is 1,000, so that's a big change. And then they have added filter and sorting options for the bill date, bill number, due date, and if this applies to you, currency columns. On the credit available column, you will now be able to see that there's a hyperlink, meaning that you will have the option to drill down on that value to see all of the details that make up that $150. So you do have that visibility. So again, this is in the works. So hopefully it'll be something that we show within the next couple of releases. Okay. I think that's all I had to cover, Stephen.
Thanks, Isabel. So just due to time, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So thank you guys for all joining us. If you guys do have any questions, then please contact us at csp@acumenfl.com. Or you can reach out to your account manager and we'll set up a one-on-one meeting to give you a deeper dive into Release 4. In addition, please be on the lookout for webinar invites as we go into December and January, as we plan to cover some third-party add-ons. So with that, we hope you all have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing you guys again soon.